Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of the Leadership Launchpad's Pick and Mix podcast. And wow, I think my guest today is probably one of the reasons why I even created this format of a podcast. Because if you're watching it, you will have seen his face and you'll recognise who it is. If you're not, then we've got the great Ross McGill, who you might know as Ross Morrison McGill. But what you might not know is that Morrison is his middle name, as I just found out. I didn't know if it was a marriage kind of link, but no.
Yeah, some people have accused me of being fancy with a double barrel name and things
Oh
like that.
yeah.
But I've had to expose my middle name to the world, but simply because there's another Ross McGill in America who publishes books. So
Oh
my
God.
publishers asked me to put my middle name on the cover. So
Well, I
there you
love
go.
that. There we go. And I was
Yeah.
just joking with Ross that I wouldn't want to put my middle name on because I'm not particularly proud of it, and people even sniggered at it when we were at my wedding, which was hilarious. But anyway, maybe we'll save that for another
Yeah.
episode.
We'll save that for the quiz.
Exactly. So yeah, so welcome, Ross. I mean, the reason I said about him being one of the reasons I created this is that if you've been around in education for any amount of time, you will have interacted with him or his content or his company or something like that because the stats are just bonkers. I mean, when I last looked, it was 19, but we just talked about 20 million visitors to the website, which is just crazy. So yeah, so welcome, Ross. I guess what we'd love to do is to start off with tell us a bit about what you do, but then very quickly backtrack and tell us how you got there.
Right. Okay. Good question. So I now work with teachers in schools all across the country, internationally, if they'll have me. Been about 600 plus schools now, face to face in the last 8 years, maybe 120-ish thousand teachers I've trained. Published 12 books. When I'm not on the road, I am at my desk running a small team that's on the website Teacher Toolkit, which started off as a blog in 2007. And as reading habits have changed, pre or post AI, the blog's still consumed by lots of teachers globally. Using Google Analytics to guide me. It's become a resource platform, downloads, all that kind of stuff. I'd like to think I was one of the first to start kind of doing this kind of stuff.
I think you were.
Obviously, it's a bit more TikToky, these kind of things. So a lot of people's habits are changing, but there's still an audience. There's still people reading things. It's definitely influenced many other teachers, and in some parts, shape or form, government policy and those kind of things.
Yeah,
It started off as a hobby. So while I was a full-time school leader, um, I found the technology. I could write a blog, and rather than read the TES or a local authority website, I could write a blog. And Chris replied from Australia and said, "Oh, I love what you're doing in your classroom. Can I have this, or can you tell me more about X, Y, Z?" Then off I went, and very quickly in the first year, this is 2007, 30,000 readers
crazy.
globally. So really, the very early days is of the kind of bell curve, I suppose.
Yeah,
Um, lots of headaches around it all, so it's now managing people's data, credit cards, all those kind of headaches. But
yeah.
a lot of steep learning curves, legal cases, all those kind of
Wow.
mistakes and hiccups along the way. Um, Quite a few investors come my way, so it's at a place where it needs to be scaled. If I get run over tomorrow, that is it. It's about its footprint and its legacy. It's a good way to be. I guess my brain day to day is more about the mechanics of the website and how it can grow, scale. So that
Yeah,
kind of leadership, technical tech side of things. But it all stemmed from me being a teacher. I'm a design and technology teacher by trade, very much into graphics and branding. So I self-branded myself in the Red Teacher Toolkit. As you
yeah,
can see, being a design teacher, toolkit made sense. So a toolkit or teacher to help with all these different tools. You remember the red logo, keep calm, carry on
yeah.
branding, very early days, social media. So I used that originally, and I had my, folded my arms in my kind of leadership suit in front of it. And then
Yeah.
as it got popular, I thought I might get sued here. So I quickly got rid of the branding and just kept myself in front of a red logo. So when
Okay.
people search on Google, they'll find historical logos, but it's essentially stayed like Teacher Toolkit on the website is today, and it stayed like that. And the brand exceeds me. I'm trying to slowly unpick my personal identity from it because it's
Yeah.
a lot more of a team ethos.
Sure.
I've tried to avoid full-time employees, but I now recognise I can no longer do that.
Yeah.
I think that's my past head teacher life, where you don't really want to do with staff headaches anymore.
No.
But yeah, it's an interesting space. I find myself getting into analytics, to marketing, to
Yeah.
resource download data,
Oh my
to
goodness.
reading research, summarizing it into nice, succinct summaries, which I've done for a long time,
Yeah.
long before AI. So a good 90% of the content, I would say, is written by me,
Yeah.
handcrafted on a typeboard, so to speak,
Yeah.
or keyboard, and maybe 5% by other bloggers in the early days of people writing on my site for some exposure. 4 of those became authors, by the way,
Wow.
and maybe another 5% of content, 3,000 blogs, about 2 million words,
Yeah.
and maybe sponsored content. So before we knew what an influencer was,
Right.
I had these market forces coming around me. So what started off as, can you tweet this and we'll give you
Yeah.
£100, which, back in the day, I'd pay my petrol for the month. So it was
Yeah.
crazy. But now it's just ridiculous figures in some cases. So it's allowed me to kind of step out and do things differently, influence a lot more people beyond my own school community. And I guess a lot of people don't know that it kind of grew out of a place of adversity. I kind of lost my job to school leadership job to redundancy. My boy was born premature at the time, so I'd gone from a good salary in London as a secondary deputy head to zero overnight. My
Yeah.
wife was on premature maternity leave, so
Right.
at the time your maternity salary starts straight away.
Right.
So thankfully he was safe and well. He's now 14 years old, but we
Amazing.
went from our joint salary in London overnight to zero,
Yeah.
and I'd taken voluntary redundancy because I was unhappy with the school. So it was quite a significant moment, and
Jeez.
that was about 2011. So I turned the blog into a hobby while I was at home writing and those kind of things,
Yeah.
and then kept it up while I got back into a supply leadership job. And I guess the last catalyst we'll talk about later was in 2018. I decided to step out and do it full time.
Wow. How cool.
Yeah.
And of course, the maths of it blows my mind. Whenever I meet people who, influence teachers, you get that initial number, don't you? So, like, let's say 20 million teachers. But of course, if every one of those teachers teaches, I don't know, 1,000, 10,000, the amount of students that you've influenced must be, wow. I mean, you're going to have a big smile on your face, surely, towards the end when you think, yeah, made a
Yeah.
difference.
Well, I do it because I love it, and I guess that curiosity to for learning. I don't know all the answers, so I'm obviously keen to learn a lot more. I
Yeah.
guess traveling all across the country and being at a wide range of events, I've got this very wide macro view of
Yeah.
education, as well as that granular what happens in 1 minute in one single lesson.
Exactly.
I've tried to write a blog in what I saw in 1 minute in a lesson
Yeah.
observation. It became a thesis in its own
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Trying to unpick everything, but yeah, I love doing it. I guess it boils down to I'm very passionate about the classroom. It's a
Yeah.
complex space. I don't think
Yeah.
anyone that's in the business knows it is, but anyone outside sometimes thinks that it is. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
to highlight the complexities
I love it.
and try to make it as practical and easy for people to do. So I did
Yeah.
25 years in the classroom, which is a good shift.
That is a good shift. Yeah, that's more than most people.
Yeah.
Well, let's get stuck into these things because I'm fascinated to hear more about your story and sort of the person behind the process. Although we should talk about that because we should definitely talk about it before we get started because I was explaining to Ross about sort of that I am interested in the person behind the process. And what did you say?
Well, yeah. So been thinking about a product, doing a podcast about the product behind the person. So
So,
I guess one of the most successful things on my site is the subscription. So you got subscriptions everywhere, but what's the kind of make or break point behind the scenes? What's the software used?
yeah,
So
hilarious.
if you think of you unpick everybody's shopping carts at some,
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be a subscription, but just as an example,
yeah.
you'd have this macro view of what people are purchasing and
Right.
the tools and the software. Anyway, I'll stop there. But
That's so funny.
someone will steal the idea.
There we go then. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't say it too much. So your first Fast Friends question you picked was around how you wished, or what you would have liked to have been raised differently? Tell us about
Yeah,
that.
well, I guess as an alternative, so obviously you can have traumatic upbringings and things, but I grew up in the Salvation Army, in a Christian background. My mother and father were Salvation Army officers, so basically they go to what's called what essentially is a religious education training college,
Right.
trained to be a vicar, but in the Salvation Army you're called an officer. You might have heard of William Booth. I don't know, the founder of the Salvation Army. They're always first on the scene in emergencies, giving people soup and things like that. But there's two aspects. There's the church side and the social services side. The social services side is the hostels.
Right.
So my mother and father were already in hostels in Scotland, and they moved into the social side in the Salvation Army. So they trained to be a vicar, and essentially they were deployed to social service settings.
Right.
So my entire childhood was in hostels. So we'd
Right.
have a flat or a house in the building or in the land. But my everyday occurrence as I went to and from school was around drug addicts, alcoholics, schizophrenics. I mean, I don't think it would happen today in the modern world, but I had a childhood on a farm, in a
Yeah.
inner city men's hostel, to a fisherman's retreat,
Wow.
to children's homes. Farm animals and all sorts of things. So it was, but I went to 7 locations
Okay.
or 7 schools, I should say. So my mum and dad were in the Salvation Army. They get a kind of pocket money salary, so they get their house and car and things, but they get
Okay. Yeah.
a kind of pocket money salary. So essentially, I was a free school meals child by definition.
Sure.
But we moved to 7 schools. So I grew up in Scotland until I was 11. Moved to London for 2 years, Newcastle for 1, Wales for 3, Fleetwood near Blackpool for 4, and back down to London to train to teach. And that was all by the age of 19.
Wow.
And even in Scotland, there was 2 locations, so 7 different schools.
Yeah.
So as much as I loved it, and I'd like to think that I'm good at making friendships, there's also that
Yeah.
shyness because you had to start again. Didn't have that footprint. I've got got a couple of people I've known for a long time, and obviously you've got that Facebook friends where you can track people
Yeah.
that you've known for years. But other than that, I don't have those childhood friends or that best friend that you've had your whole school
No.
life that some people have. So you always want what other people don't have. But
Yeah.
I guess it's that. But there are some positives about the whole thing. But I kind of wonder if, what would it be like to grow up in one location with friends your entire life and that
Yeah.
community?
It's really interesting. Would you call any of those more home than any of the others out of the 7?
Well, I always believe I'm Scottish.
Right.
I think it's because of vast, until my early 20s, even after, we were always up there for Hogmanay and birthdays, families, funerals, weddings, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And, haggis is part of our, annual ritual on Burns night and putting the kilt on. I've just bought my own kilt for the first time in 50
Oh
years.
wow.
So, always hand-me-downs or hired kilts. So I've actually got my own, and it's my own clan, which is nice.
That's super cool.
So that I kind of feel like, you get to that age where you think, right, you treat yourself and you look after,
Yeah.
pass it on. So, yeah,
That's fascinating.
I identify as Scottish first. Then it's really weird because I'm a Northerner, but I also think I'm a Londoner. So I guess
Okay.
I'm British,
Yeah.
very British. If I'd lived in London for 30 years, I come back to see my family who now live in the Northwest.
Right.
People would think I'm a Londoner, but
Yeah.
people think I'm a Northerner. So I've had that my whole life.
Yeah.
But yeah, Scottish first, then probably a bit of North. I'm back in the North now after 30 years in London. So
Amazing.
yeah, there we go.
That says something. Brilliant. Well, for people that are new to the podcast, there's another element that we do, which is called an ignition point. And so these are, experiences or events in people's lives that cause some sort of transformation. And so we ask guests to come on and talk about 2 ignition points or events that they feel like changed them sort of demonstrably. And so Ross has been thinking about which ones to pick. And so which one came to mind first, Ross?
God, I've got loads. Depends how deep.
Yeah, let's go proper deep.
Right. Well, deep. Well, I guess you'd need to put on the podcast as a warning, as a child in all these various settings, I was abused as a child sexually, and I only really dealt with it 30 years later as an adult
Wow.
when I was out of school.
Right.
So I guess I was dealing with it, but always shut it down because I was in a school environment for want of reputation, social media searches, and what have you.
Sure.
And I guess just over years dealing with it and working out how it's affected me mentally, physically, those kind of things. But I suppose the catalyst point is when I stopped teaching after 25 years and had a bit more mental space,
Right.
traveling in particular in the car, listening to radios. There's probably a kind of key moment, maybe 8 years ago. There's lots of historical cases in the news in football. I think Chelsea, Barrow Binnell's the name that pops up, and a few others. And there seemed to be a catalogue, so it was always a trigger for me every time I heard these things.
Yeah.
So I just started to deal with it, and basically the nutshell was I wanted to just share it with my family,
Yeah.
and that was a big thing for me. And then report it to the police, which I did, and talk to some. I think it's Survivors UK, I think, which is a male sexual abuse mental charity. And then you
Mhm.
get into all the statistics and how often it happens to men or
Yeah.
boys and things like that. So that was a significant personal episode in my life.
Yeah. And
Which you think about, and I get quite fierce about how people use the word abuse quite lightly.
okay.
You can hear kids in the playground. I used to get really cross with them when they say, "Oh, so and so's, X, Y abused me," and things like that.
Right.
So you can see how these triggers and what I actually learned from disclosing it and actually sharing about it online was I was inundated with all my social media audience
Yeah.
sharing the same experiences. They're all horrific, but some really gory, horrific.
Right.
So I wasn't ready for that.
No.
So I guess in hindsight and with advice is if you do declare it, be ready to signpost people to the right places.
Right.
I wasn't ready to do that, I suppose, at the time. So I was having to learn quickly how to self-manage all these requests and
Yeah.
disclosures I was receiving. People that had lived their entire life that had never told their family. People in
Yeah.
the 70s, 80s. So that's a big personal one, I guess.
That's a big one. Yeah.
Big one,
And
but I was what's a good 8 years ago. So I was 44.
yeah,
This happened to me when I was 13. So it's a long time to live
that's a
silent,
long time.
and to be trusted or not to be trusted, be believed,
Yeah.
things like that. And you have people like prime ministers and things that would kind of say silly, loose things about historical abuse and things like that, and whether we should invest police forces. I think those are the words of Boris Johnson. So you can get things like that can make your scar even deeper and things
Yeah.
like that. Anyway, I'm in a good place with all that.
Good.
And
What I was going to say, what have the most sort of positive results been for you personally from sharing it with the family?
being able to talk about it
Yeah.
and with confidence and not feel dirty or wrong or ill or shy about it.
Yeah.
And something that needs to be talked about. It happens that men abuse boys or whatever gender, and that it still happens, and it's a mirror of our society, and it still happens today.
Yeah.
And pre DNA and pre CCTV, these things have gone on for decades, centuries,
Yeah.
perhaps. And I do go back to my childhood. I do think the resilience and my environment, although it was in this regard detrimental,
Yeah.
if you flip the coin, in some regards, I had a lot of resilience,
Yeah.
independence, mixing with lots of people from very disadvantaged backgrounds, seeing dead bodies.
Right.
Also, my childhood was very unique, very interesting,
Wow.
but also a very safe and secure place, ironically,
Right.
where I was exposed to a lot of these situations. So, if there's a tough thing that's happening out on the street, or someone comes over and begs 10 pence out your hand or whatever, I'm adept at those situations. I don't shy away from it. It's just how I've grown up, so it's very
Yeah.
much my DNA, that kind of helping people or that service. So I think that's why I was a teacher for so long, and I always chose to work in the most tough inner city secondary schools in London because I loved the banter, I loved the challenge, I loved the headaches,
Yeah.
I shouldn't say I loved the poverty. That's the wrong way to describe it, but I recognised it in
Yeah.
my own environments. So I was never really numb to it or shy to it, I suppose. So there's a positive to it as well. It's made me who I am.
Yeah, of
Given me that
course.
resilience to
Wow. Well,
fight hard and dig deep and things like that. And I was recently invited to Number 10
I saw
in
that.
recognition to my content creation. And I guess you can have an exclusive first. I don't know when the podcast will be published, but I've been invited back to Number 10 to meet the Prime Minister, which is pretty
Wow.
cool. All for a blog and
Wow.
resources. But
Yeah,
I guess it's nice recognition
of course it is.
of all the hard work and the resilience and all the adversity. And there are times when I want to throw it all in.
Yeah.
When it doesn't pay the bills, or you deal with a kind of legal case, or people aren't using your resources as you'd hoped. Just like any small business, that it's been self-taught
Yeah, of
as
course.
a result of having a large audience
Yeah.
and lots of people wanting something from you. That influencer again. So how do you, in a nice way, monetize it to grow a
Yeah.
business, but also to pay yourself a salary now that I no longer teach and I'm self-employed?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I've got 19,400,000 viewers to go before I reach you. We've got a few more to go.
You'll get there. You get
We'll
there.
get there one day. Brilliant. Wow. Let's move on to your first kind of launch pad. And again, for people that are new to the podcast, the idea is that this part of it links to the Launchpad book. And we
Right.
ask kind of guests to select a couple of launch pads that resonate with them the most. And then I'll sort of narrate through what I was thinking when I made it. And then we'll ask Ross why it particularly kind of resonates with him. And so the first one that he chose was this idea. The title was Backseat Driver. It's around kind of cognitive biases, really. And for me, it was a real awakening when I started reading about cognitive biases because I didn't know they existed. They weren't part of my past education, and really opened up, I don't know, a deeper level of understanding about why I do what I do, and certainly why I do what I do unconsciously. And so, yeah, this idea that we've got these kind of systematic errors in our thinking that occur often when we're sort of processing or interpreting information. And a lot of times they occur when we've got way too much information. And so we try to find sort of shortcuts to get through that. When we're trying to, and this is the one that hits me the most, when I'm trying to make sense of something, and if those are combined, I've got lots of stuff to think about and I want to make sense of it quickly without often knowing it, I'm using shortcuts to get there. Again, when we need to act fast. And then there's something around when we're deciding what to remember, potentially we're affected by biases, which then scarily affects what we remember and the accuracy of our memories, which is, And so I started looking into that. And then I started thinking, what are some of these biases? And you can go online and there's I'll make it up. There's probably hundreds of them. The ones that kind of most came to mind were these. There's this first one called the anchoring bias, where typically we kind of rely heavily on the first piece of information that we learn. We're very influenced by, the first time we see something. There's something called attentional bias. Again, there's this different people pay attention to different things, even when in exactly the same scenario. And so that's interesting. There's something called availability bias, which is similar to anchoring in that, we tend to put more value on things that come to us quickly. So if things make sense to us quickly, we probably value them more than things that don't come quickly. This is the massive one for me, and I've terrible with my wife about this, about confirmation bias, in that I typically only give people information that confirms my beliefs. So if I want to buy a new road bike, I only give my wife the information she requires to strengthen the need for me to have another bike. And then also if I've got a very strong idea about something, I tend to go looking for stuff that validates that point of view, and that's dangerous. But I now know about it. I don't know if this is a British thing or a teacher thing or life thing, but negativity bias, we tend to pay more attention to negative things. Projection bias is the one where you tend to, without knowing it, project your beliefs and behaviors onto other people or into the future. And then this is, I think, massive in schools, this idea of sunk cost bias, or sometimes they call it the gambler's fallacy.
Yeah.
This idea that because you've already invested time and energy and money, sometimes you find it hard to come back from that. And so we see that, don't we? If you get your whole staff body to go in one certain direction and you put a lot of time and effort into creating stuff, to then go back and say, "Oh, we've changed our mind, we're scrapping that," would not go down particularly well. And then, interestingly, we haven't talked about my doctorate, but I had a very uncomfortable conversation with my supervisor once. So I did my doctorate was on leadership self-efficacy or leadership confidence. So I got people in my trust, my multi academy trust, to rate their levels of confidence against different elements of their leadership. And so I did it all. It took me about, I don't know, 8 months to collect the data, and then another 5 months to analyze it. I gave it to my supervisor, and the rating scale was 10, and the average score over 150 leaders was 7.2.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, social desirability bias. I don't trust any of your data. And I was like, what? He said, yeah. And so the idea behind social desirability bias is that we tend to act in a manner that's favourable by others. And so he was basically saying the leaders that I sampled were telling me what they thought I wanted to hear, or what was socially kind of. So that was painful. Although I said, "Well, what do I do now?" He said, "That's fine. Just got to write it up in the write up and just say all my data's crap, but I know about it now." Yeah, so that was funny. Anyway, ways that we can kind of maybe have a go at dealing with these biases. The first one, of course, is to increase your awareness. If you can know that they exist, then great. One of the ones that helps me a lot, and we won't go into it now, but I've actually got a tattoo of this on my chest, which is slightly random. But this idea of stimulus response, the kind of Viktor Frankl sort of stuff. If you can put some space between stimulus and response, you tend to make better responses naturally. So, count to 10, whatever it is. And so once you become aware of these biases, if you can put a bit of space between knowing, oh, this might be a situation where I might be affected by this bias, even that can sometimes stop it from, either happening or having a bad one. The other thing to do is to try and just engineer yourself out of disturbed processes, to have frameworks and, methodologies and processes that mean that the human element is not as strong. That's a useful one. And then the last one, I made up this word, I think, cognitive tripwires, but almost sort of things that you can, I don't know, questions or that would bring to light a cognitive bias. I'm trying to think of an example about the buying the bike one, but my wife would say something like, "How many bikes can you ride at one time?" Like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, 12 is a bit extreme. Okay, maybe we will have 13 then. Anyway,
Or bicycles.
Yeah, exactly.
Bicycles or motorbikes?
Oh, bicycles. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I did try and do my CBT one.
12 of each would still be a problem, wouldn't it?
It would be, yeah.
Unless you're a motorcyclist for a career or something.
That would be cool, wouldn't it? Have a big garage. What about your connection with cognitive biases? Why did this resonate with you?
I was just looking on my website. I wrote a blog in 2019 on the very topic. So
Did you?
I really
Wow.
got into the psychology of decision making, and then I started once I understood. There's many others, but
Yeah.
the ones you got on the screen there. This is what teachers are like on the corridor, or how I react, or what leaderships around the table
Yeah.
when we all can't agree on something, or
Yeah.
make the wrong decision, what's actually happening in the room. So, the blog that I wrote, I gave some school examples of typical phrases that people would use to help me understand all these different bias, what they might look
Okay.
like and sound like.
Have you got any that you're susceptible to all the time?
There's a good question. The ones I've got written here in front of me, I guess the belief bias.
Yeah.
That the example I put, I didn't know why you didn't want to ban mobile phones, but your conclusion seems right, so I'll go with it anyway.
Yeah.
So we can do that in our personal lives as well as in our workplace.
Yeah.
Um, or you can have the courtesy bias. I hear what you're saying. Exclusions are high, but let's not talk about it again. We know the issue. Let's just move on. Just
Yeah.
I want to save time and not entertain it. Um, you've obviously got the bandwagon one. Everyone
Oh,
agrees, even though you don't want to. So you don't want to spend more time on the meeting or upset someone.
yeah.
Those kind of things. Um, the other one that I really liked was the Pygmalion effect, which I've known and written about in education for a while. And I don't know if people have ever seen the study. It's from the 60s, but essentially they got 60 kids, chose them at random out of a hat. You're going to teach the clever kids, Chris. I'm going to teach the not so clever.
Okay.
Reinforced all year, and at the end of the year, your kids got the better exam scores because you told them and reinforced to them that
Right.
they were clever. Whereas I set glass ceilings for them.
Yeah.
I restricted the ceiling, I suppose. So the kids only got the outcomes that I expected them to, and reinforced to them. So I
Yeah.
guess kids, they respond to your
Of course you
expectations.
do.
So I think it's a really important one. That one that it comes from the George Bernard Shaw
Yeah.
play My Fair Lady. So the tramp dresses up as a
Yeah.
sophisticated lady, and everyone believes it.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And of course, we talk about the Launchpad book every now and again, but my son would say that's the picture book, and the Posh book, which is behind again, which only got published in July, was based off the doctorate and a bit autobiographical because, like,
Yeah,
I didn't realize it, but my confidence was boundaried by the confidence of my peer group, and it wasn't until, like, for lots of us who became teachers, one teacher showed more belief in me that I tried something I couldn't do before and was good at it, and then just ended up on this kind of confidence spiral,
right.
which hasn't really stopped yet. So yeah,
Yeah,
um,
good.
well, maybe my wife would say I might have gone too far with the
Yeah, it's an
confidence, but
interesting world. All these bias. Yeah, you can see them in everyday life if you understand them a bit more.
yeah, fascinating. All right,
I guess the key question: how to react to them, isn't it? When you see them
really
coming.
tricky. Let's get into your second kind of fast friends question because this is interesting. You chose kind of what have you dreamed of doing but not done it yet?
Uh, right. So all the things I want to do is I guess I would love to sit at a drawing table and design products, solve problems.
Okay.
I guess my childhood was very much into graphics and sitting with an old-fashioned drawing board
Yeah.
and drawing orthographic drawings and
I
things like
love,
that.
love that.
And then it evolved into a bit more creativity. So you'd have a big drawing desk in your room,
Yeah.
the big easels, drawing, doodling, sketching, those kind of things. And then I think maybe at degree level, I had two, here's your sliding doors moment. I was a couple of grades short in my A levels to go to Loughborough, where I would have done a pure design degree
Right.
with education. Or I ended up at Goldsmiths and I did an education degree
Wow.
with design.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the teacher first it became, and then the design later, but it could have been very different. It might have been design
So
first, and
crazy.
maybe I don't know what would have happened then.
Wow. I mean,
Um,
I don't know if 19 million people need a design blog. Of
no, well, that's true, but I think you can see the brand elements through teacher talk
course you can.
talking and all that kind of stuff, and all how I really like things to be quite clean, easy to follow. I'm a is it instructional designer, I think the
That's
right
it.
word. I can't stand instructions; they're so poorly written,
Yeah.
really difficult to follow.
Yeah.
Teach like IKEA, simple steps,
Love it.
images, that dual coding, really easy to use.
That's a great blog as well. I should do a blog post
Yeah,
on that. Teach like IKEA.
teach like IKEA. So yeah, the graphics would probably be the most obvious one.
Yeah.
Solving those problems.
So you,
I guess it looks a bit like marketing in today's world. Coming up with great ideas and
yeah.
helping products sell and things like that.
Well, you bought yourself a kilt. You're going to buy yourself a drawing board one day?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's space in my office here to sit and do them, but I think it would be a retirement thing where I just want to sit and potter and doodle
Yeah.
away, and might have to come up with a little focus. Whether I just synthesize complex ideas in nice little cartoons or sketches.
That'd be cool.
There's plenty of tools out there now, so
Oh,
you
yeah.
can do it on a little board and it gets onto your computer and things
Of
like
course it
that.
is.
Animate them through AI. So
Oh,
there's
wow.
lots of
Well,
possibilities.
I'll look forward to
Me,
that.
Yeah, it's one of those. Every time I draw a doodle, my wife kind of says, "Oh, you're very talented." It's that natural thing you've got that I don't really exploit enough.
Sure. All right. Well, we'll look forward to that when it comes
Very early
along.
days sketch notes before everyone else started to do it. I think.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to your the second ignition point then. So another point in your life where you feel like, you were demonstrably different afterwards.
Well, I think it's the voluntary redundancy thing. So this is about
Yeah.
2010, 11. So I was in a new leadership job in a secondary school in Wembley area, London, and I was learning my trade. Lots of mistakes. Very difficult school, but it went through a few difficult periods. It was the very early days of academisation. This particular multi academy trust, way back, lots of financial irregularities
All right.
documented. Money through the back door and all those kind of things. And just the nature of the site, it was joined with another school. So essentially, the logic was join the schools together, one building, one leadership team instead of two, those kind of things. Anyway, I was going to be a father at the same time. I think I taught 18 years at the time, 17
Wow.
years or something. So I just thought, I'm not happy. Let me just, and I'd already been fishing around for other opportunities, in and out of teaching, I guess within education, but not in the classroom.
Yeah.
And then I kind of was, keep my cards close to my chest, but I thought, I'm going to go with voluntary redundancy, just take some money and have some time out. I'm going to be a dad.
Yeah.
And then as I was mentally preparing for this is around February, and the redundancy conversations were happening in March, April, those kind of things, ready for September. Um, my boy was born 3 months premature, so
Wow.
he was £1.9 ounces, so literally the size of my hand. Life and death, all that kind of stuff. So that happened in May, and essentially I was on garden leave.
Yeah.
So I was employed but not in school, and I guess as that salary ended in August, at least the redundancy payment came through. So that, I guess, mentally had me maybe secure for 6 months to pay mortgages and things like that. Plus my wife on maternity. There was no such thing as a premature leave or anything. There is now, but there wasn't then. So you get your statutory maternity straight away. So both of us were on leadership salaries to nothing overnight.
Wow.
Plus, to make it worse, the nearest hospital was 85 miles away. You
No.
need to have an incubator available, and you need to have a medical team ready when you take the baby out. So we lived in North London, and we ended up in Ashford, which is just shy of Dover. So 85-mile drive every day, and you've got to go home, you've got to sleep, you've got to rest, you've got to change clothes. So we were driving back and forward every day. My wife had a cesarean, so she couldn't drive. So it's just exhausting, plus the emotions behind life and death and
God,
things.
yeah.
So there was that. So the job happening and the premature thing and no salary and then father. How am I going to, look after my career? How am I going to feed my family, pay, look after my wife and son? Anyway, so fast forward 3 months, he was home on oxygen, and I wasn't teaching for the first time. This is September. So it was, a bit of a honeymoon here, a bit of cash in the bank, but
Yeah.
actually, what am I going to do? And the reality for my wife being on maternity was, not your happy, Larry kind of, let's go meet my mates in the park for a cup of tea.
Yeah.
It was, when the premature child gets ill, they're sick for a month,
Right.
not a couple of days, and everything in their body's been scanned or tested, for a good 6 months after they're born. So it's hospitals. You had 3 or 4, hernia operations, blood transfusions, etc. So it was full on. In fact, we didn't go abroad for 5 years. It was that tough. Anyway, he's fine, healthy now. However, back then that was a critical moment because
Yeah.
essentially I'd made a choice to leave a job I wasn't happy. It was a risk, professionally and financially. People think you're not good if you've been redundant.
Yeah.
How do you explain that story? But on hindsight, and it's very hard at the time because it's very raw, but I look back and think there's always someone that's willing to listen. One person will understand. There's a school or an employer that will understand. There's a lot more awareness about it now. 2010, there wasn't a lot of social media or tools and technology. Now we've got a lot more of a wider understanding.
Yeah.
Easy to find communities today than it was then. Um, and I had an old blog called Teacher Toolkit in 2007. So what actually happened was I started to write updates about my son's life in hospital as a daily diary for me. I'd come home, write it on the blog, put it on my Facebook wall, and again, early days of influencer, I had maybe 250,000 views and people donating gifts, being asked to go on the telly with Lorraine.
Yeah.
Got a picture somewhere of David Cameron and things like that. So it was all a bit weird and strange. And we helped write some books for premature charities for other parents because no one takes you into the premature ward when you have a baby. They only show you it if it's likely it's going to happen,
Right.
literally before it happens. So there's the whole downsides of pregnancy that people don't prepare you for. The majority of people have a nice honeymoon experience
Sure.
giving birth. But there's the other sides, the death or the premature side. So where I'm trying to get to is I wrote an old blog and that went viral with Freddie. And then when I got home and had nothing else to do apart from general updates, I thought, well, let me just write my Teacher Toolkit blog again.
Yeah.
And at the time, the Guardian Teacher Network had started. So I pulled in a card a long time ago. I won the Teacher of the Year award before it was on the telly.
Yeah.
And the Guardian sponsored my category, Secondary Teacher of the Year. So I emailed and said, look, I've won this and you sponsored it. Can I start writing for you? And they said, yes. So I started writing on the Guardian. And that snowballed really quickly. The Guardian, my blog. And then it was only a couple of months I got into a supply role in a leadership school. That got my love back for leadership and for teaching. And I just thought, well, I'm just going to write about what I do. And it's probably every week or every half term to begin with, but eventually it became pretty much every day I was writing a blog.
Wow.
But I'd learned quickly how to use the tool, so voice dictation.
Yeah.
I guess early days, it wasn't AI, so to speak, but if you type your microphone on your WhatsApp, you can speak. So I've been doing that for 15 years.
Yeah.
So my head teacher at the time, he was paralyzed from the neck down, and he had a tool called Drag and Dictate, which learns from your voice, learns from your accent. So I grabbed that, and that's how I managed to write so many blogs so quickly while I was full-time teaching. And
Right.
I guess the rest is history. I think of the 12 books.
Yeah.
Easily 6 of them have been written through my voice.
Wow.
Where the effort is editing and writing and reading it all
Yeah.
after you've dictated it. So the art is make sure you're watching it as you speak, because your voice or accent sometimes makes the word incoherent when you read it back later.
Yeah.
A bit like your references for your doctorate. Reference every single time from the start,
God.
not after you've written it.
Yeah.
Made that silly mistake too. So that's how that was, I guess, another pivotal moment. I guess if I squeeze a third one in, it would be when I decided to leave full time after a nasty Ofsted inspection.
Wow. Well, I mean, yeah, what an incredible. And again, I think the fact that you're sort of presenting those ignition points as having some sort of silver lining is a testament to you as an individual, because I mean, I feel a bit affected myself by both those stories. And I guess
you think about when we talk about resilience for kids, how do you teach kids resilience? No one's taught me that resilience, I think, or it's very hard to break it down into practical terms. But how did I respond to those things? What tools are you given to respond? Because I could quite easily said, "I'll sod it.
Yeah.
I'm done with teaching," or my childhood trauma and things like that. So I'm always curious about that part.
Yeah.
What makes my character that way? Parenting, it's hard to unpick that.
Yeah, it is hard. I mean, potentially there's a link back to what we talked about earlier about that idea of stimulus and response. And, Frankel talks quite a lot about if you can control the response despite the stimulus, that's where the power is.
Yeah.
And it's probably the only thing we have got control over is the way we respond to things.
Yeah, and there's an old, the original behaviour guru, John Bailey. Don't know if you remember him. He's on the early days of Teachers TV.
Yeah.
I used to work with John in lots of different places. Again, pre-social media. And when I told him one or two, stand up, brush your armour down, that kind of stuff, and just get back into battle. And it's just a simple but a really good way to just, I've just been through another difficult event just last week, actually, for the business.
Right.
and I probably took maybe 5-10 minutes of being dumb and out and doubtful and things like
Yeah,
that. But back to my desk Monday, and I think, right, I now know what I need to do next. So I hope I can make them regret their decisions. So.
yeah. And I mean, make sure this is right. But your friend Bailey was the guy with the square with the dot in it. Behavior,
Featured TV, but John,
behavior with Bailey, wasn't it? Was that?
yeah, that's the one. Yeah,
Yeah. I again, I'm talking about tattoos quite a lot, but I don't know if my wrist will show you people that are.
yeah, there we go. I can see it. Yeah,
I again, not to turn, not
black dot, white square.
that's
Yeah,
it. Yeah, not to make myself, part. Maybe someone else joked about me being the guest on this one day, but um, my son had an accident at home, and I caused it, and
right.
it was pretty full on, like Great Ormond Street, intensive care, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
And I mean, people will say I didn't cause it, but believe me, I made the decision not thinking he would be in harm, and then he was in harm. Basically, a brick built shed. Kind of, we were demolishing it. We were taking a family photo, which was my idea, and then it
right.
collapsed.
Oh
Anyway,
God.
the point was after it, all I could think about was that event.
Yes.
And of course, what I needed to do was to get a bit of perspective and to see that actually, yeah, the dot is that
Yes.
event, but there's all
The
this
event.
space. We'll save that for another day. And he's fine now, so she's great. Anyway, let's get stuck into your next launch pad because this is, for me, a hilarious one, and it'd be cathartic for me to explain why I made this. So we were talking about this idea of poor proxies for leadership, and of course, we've probably most people are probably familiar with sort of Professor Rob Coe's work on
Yeah.
poor proxies for teaching, and if you're not, he had these reflections around if learning is invisible, then we have to use other things to kind of, oh, look, that's happening, so learning must be happening. And he was suggesting that we might be using the wrong ones. Not that they're not useful and linked to learning, but we probably shouldn't put as much weight on things like engagement and
Yes.
single answer and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I started thinking, well, I thought leadership's a bit like that. We probably look at people in our schools and think, oh, they're a great leader. And I wonder whether we're using the wrong proxies. So I started kicking it around as an idea. And what became quite uncomfortable quite quickly was that I basically described myself as a leader. And so the first one that comes up quite often, isn't it, is that people go, oh, visibility. I want my leaders to be visible. And potentially this idea that being visible is not always, what it's cracked up to be. But when we see people that are at the face of the projects, or they're always at the front, or they're around the site a lot, there's a potential that we can think that that's good leadership. And I don't think it's helpful to have that as a message because sometimes you have got to be in your office doing the work. The next one's knowledge. I mean, of course, leaders need knowledge, but just having a ton of qualifications and loads of stored information up here does not guarantee that you'll be able to bridge that kind of knowing doing gap, or that you're able to use that knowledge in a useful way. The next one I started thinking about was busyness. Again, I hear this from people, oh, they are so busy, or they work late, or they're always sending early emails. Some sort of connection people have made to they must be great because they're so busy.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the ironic thing is, it might be because they're disorganized and really bad at time management,
Yes.
which was my story. Confident is, again, ironically, something I didn't have, I've got more of now, but learned quite quickly that whether you've got it or not, you have to lead with confidence anyway. But again, it's dangerous because, and I say this to people I work with, so it's not a secret, but just because I'm confident in my ideas and I'm confident in the way I put those across doesn't add any special validity to those ideas just because I said it in a kind of confident way. Innovation is another one I think that potentially is useful, but not a correlation. just because leaders are always doing new things or they've got a really kind of clear view of the future, and they change things really often, that's not always a good thing. And then the last one I'm struggling with, when I make these launch pads, I usually go until I run out of ideas and then just take a pause and walk away, and I'll come back a week or 2 weeks later. And I finished this one off after being in a school because uh, I went into a school. Again, my role is kind of across 35 schools, leading teaching and learning and professional development. So I regularly bump into kids who don't know who I am. And
Yeah.
it was winter, and I had one of those like I don't know, long like woolen trench coats on. And
Yes.
this kid goes, "Are you on?" This is proper West Country. He said, "Are you our new ed teacher?" And I said, "No, I'm not." I said, "Why? Why do you say that? You got one of those coats, one of those,
Yeah.
those posh coats." And I thought, "Oh,
Oh, you can spot an SLT now with a high vis.
there we go." So, of course, appearance is not something. Although, I guess there is something about
Shirt and tie
professionalism.
or high vis, yeah.
But anyway, any experience you've
I
recently?
have seen a head teacher walk around in bare feet, I think.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
yeah,
What do you think
apparently.
then? Am I missing any off the list, or can you resonate with any of
Well,
those?
I can resonate with them all. I mean, when you first showed me the poor proxies for leadership title, I thought, right, Ofsted. If I get an outstanding Ofsted judgment, does
Oh,
is
there
that
we
a
go.
poor proxy for good leadership?
Absolutely.
Because we all know the validity and reliability headaches with Ofsted judgments.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, all these, and I've probably been there myself.
Oh,
I used to dress up smart. Now you can't find me with a tie on.
yeah.
For the appearance one, innovation. I like to think I'm always coming up with good ideas. Doesn't make me the bee's knees.
Yeah.
Um, Confident. I have mixed confidence. Obviously, like all of us, depends on time of day, time of year, those
Yeah.
kind of energy levels. But yeah, the busyness is definitely one that affects a lot of people when you're juggling lots of different balls and things.
Yeah.
That proxy that you're doing the right thing, you're using your time well, you deserve your salary, all those
All
kind of
that sort of
things.
stuff. Yeah.
Um, People can't get a piece of you because you're so thinly spread.
Yeah.
We all know that a well rested person's more productive.
Hmm.
It's very hard for us all to follow that.
Yeah.
What else? When you said knowledge, I thought MPQH.
Oh, yeah.
How do you go and clean the how can I say it politely? How do you clean the poo off the shoe in the primary school toilet? That's not on your MPQH, is it?
No.
So, one thing I learned about knowledge, I think, is it Cialdini, The Power of Influence?
Yeah.
Talk about knowledge as power in there. And I guess what I learned from that was there's three sources. You've got your positional power. So I'm the head teacher, I'm in charge, I make the decisions, that the buck stops with me. So you can't ever beat that
No.
position because it's their organisation. Or you've got the monetary or the budgetary power. It's my CPD budget. The budget's too low. No, you can't go on this course. It's a no.
Yeah.
But where all of us can bypass that is the knowledge is power thing. I know the most about cognitive science and neurons and whatever it might be more than anyone else. So whether you're the head teacher or in charge of the budget, I can bypass those two other influences and be in demand, so to speak, from everybody else. They
Yeah.
want to hear me. They want me on the stage. They want me. They want to pay to attend the conference, whatever, because it's that person with the most knowledge.
Yeah.
So I think that one's very interesting. But again, going back to your poor proxy, if I know the most, does it mean that I'm reliable?
Maybe, but like you said, I mean, and again, this speaks to kind of Rob's work that the idea is that these are very valuable, but potentially we don't want to, certainly with emerging leaders, get sort of strengthen the idea that this is what they need to do in order to be
Yeah.
successful.
I think what I liked about Rob Coe's work was just because students are busy doesn't mean they're learning. And I
Mm.
think myself included, 10-ish, good 10 years ago now since I first got wind of his research, especially now knowing a lot more about working memory,
Mm.
going back to that, just because students are busy doesn't mean they're learning. But even when we get into learning,
Yeah.
how do we know that has gone into long-term retention? There's lots of people's different models and theories about long-term retention and how is it stuck. Um, it goes into the classroom. Here I am, the Ofsted inspector. I ask you about your geography teacher and your geography lesson, and your curriculum intent's really mapped out clearly. It's kids are learning volcanoes and rivers, but when I talked to the year twos earlier and I said, what are you learning in geography? They couldn't articulate it with
Yeah.
any confidence. I think, well, your intention's right on the paper, but your implementation in the classroom's poor because your kids aren't doing ABC. There's a poor
Yeah.
indicator, a poor proxy, but also there's an inspector that might not understand what working memory looks like when I'm under stress
I love
from
it.
a stranger. Anyway,
Here we go then.
we'll
This is
fight
the
another day with us.
We will, yeah. The final question then. So I'm fascinated by this one. Again, so this one you chose was what personal quality do you think you need to develop the most?
Well, I always think I'm a bad listener,
Okay.
and I'm always working harder at it, trying to, in the camera, eye contact. I get so busy and excited that I interrupt people. So
Okay.
maybe it's the interruption part because I want to add to the conversation, but sometimes I don't let people finish their part.
Right.
And I get too wrapped up in saying my own answer or about me, rather than pausing and asking about others and
Yeah.
listening. So I always think listening and interrupting's the one thing that I try hard to always work on.
Yeah.
And it's always a learning curve, and it's always something I have to do, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I don't know why. You don't listen or you interrupt, and
Have you had
my
any?
version of the conversation is different to yours.
Yeah. Have you had any specific feedback in work or at home?
And it's always at home. Perhaps I mean I certainly know my presentations. I talk far too fast and pack so much in, but I'm always trying to build in breaks, go a little bit slower. And I guess having done the teacher training now 8 years, you get all sorts of feedback.
Yeah.
So when you hear they're too much content or too fast, you strip it back and go slower. And then when you build in the pauses, particularly for working memory, I've discovered that's quite a powerful thing for
Mm.
people. People get time to process, to have a quick think, pair, share with their mate as they're
Right.
saying. A lot of that CPD delivery we do in any organisation is often passive.
Yeah.
I'm at the front of the knowledge, spouting it out my mouth, hoping it's going to go in your ears. And
Yeah.
we all know it's not a very good model. So taking people through the process is much more effective, but giving them a pause,
Yeah.
I've learned is very powerful. I guess on that note, I'll pause.
I love that. And so, as well as the pausing and the sort of stripping back, have you got any other strategies that people that also need to work on their listening could use?
So there's another. I can't remember the book now. I think it was about negotiations, mirroring people's language. What do good negotiations do? Hostage situations, whatever. And I think something called mirrored language or something like that. So one little tip that I've learned, especially when I do lots of first-time kind of conversations with head teachers, is when they are telling me why they've got in touch with Teacher Toolkit or what they need for their staff.
Yeah.
You're obviously writing down, kind of keywords and things like that, but you mirror, I guess, to kind of show that you're listening.
Yeah.
You mirror back the last 3, 4, 5 keywords that they've said.
Okay.
And then come back to those kind of keywords. And I learned this very early on because when the very early days of podcasts and interviews and things like that, and me being on the other side of the camera, I always could tell when the interviewer wasn't listening to me.
Right.
Listen, because they were so fixated on asking the other question. And I've been in that situation too when I'm the interviewer. You're so you'll be this too. What's the next question?
Yeah.
When do I wrap up the podcast?
Sure.
But right now, you need to listen to the answer and show to your listeners that you've listened to what I've said. But how do you do that? Well, I think what I've learned is mirroring the language.
Yeah. Well, I think
on that note, I'll stop there and see if you've
yeah. Well, I mean, again, that's quite a common, technique, isn't it, in coaching and stuff. And of course,
yes.
you've got to be careful because if you get it wrong, it has the opposite effect, doesn't it? But I think you're right. If you mirror, if you're not trying to change the language, and yeah, I mean, we could carry on this podcast.
Yeah, and I think the obvious is that you totally swap conversation. You start talking about what you had dinner for last night or whatever else. And you can just see that the person hasn't processed or listened or might not be interested.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah. Well, I mean, we need to protect some time at the end to talk about how people can connect with you because there's so many different ways. What are the key ways people can get kind of work with you or work?
Teacher Toolkit's the easiest. So at Teacher. So the at symbol is the brand name at Teacher Toolkit. Don't go to the other Teacher Toolkits out there. I am the original. Maybe Paul Guinness, the original Teacher Toolkit. So I'm the second one.
Love it.
And or Ross McGill, but recently there's been a gang member from Scotland over in Dubai influenced all my Google searches. But if you put Ross Morrison McGill,
There we go.
my middle name, you'll find me quite easily.
And books wise, where can we get the books?
Wise, they're all on Amazon. If you're interested in cognitive science, teacher workloads, insights from schools across the UK. I'm most happiest on LinkedIn, I suppose, professionally. It's where all the algorithms seem to be kind and safer, and you can still see your friends and have a decent chat rather than being forced lots of nonsense that you see on other channels.
Yeah.
Instagram, all my chat, I used to tell my you can tell my algorithms now. Twitter, it's just a mess, isn't it?
Yeah.
What Musk has done there.
You
don't know what you're looking at anymore. You get lots of things. Well, Instagram, I seem to have Jeremy Clarkson, but as a fat baby.
Oh, I love that. So
baby voice, all these AI gifs.
Yeah.
So I think I watched a couple. Now it's just all over my
Of course
channel.
it is.
Well, try not to search anything on Instagram.
Well, you know you've made it if they make a little baby and AI video
yeah.
of you.
See me in a little baby in a fat suit in the future. I'll have made
well, I mean, I genuinely can't thank you enough. Not just for coming on and sparing some time because I know how busy you are, but some of the stuff we've talked about today, I think, will resonate very, very deeply with listeners, and I think your vulnerability and openness is just going to resonate with so many people. So, thank you ever so much. For those that are listening, thanks for listening. If you want to engage with Ross, get involved in that. If you want to get involved in the Launchpad stuff, talk to me, and we'll see you at the next one.
Bye, everyone.